Rome didn't build its empire with courage alone. It built it on debt. We always imagine the Roman legions the same way. The dazzling helmets, the armor gleaming under the sun, the slow, steady march of disciplined soldiers, the banners and the glory. But behind that image was a different truth few ever see, a giant machine that consumed money. Every spear, every helmet, every road cost silver. And keeping this world-famous army alive was never easy. Rome had to borrow, a lot. Unfortunately, this part is rarely talked about, because behind every great empire, there stands a great financial empire. The Roman Empire wasn't just a force of soldiers. It symbolized financial power. Wars weren't fought only on the battlefield. They were financed, traded, and guaranteed. Just like business ventures. In the early days of the Republic, Rome's army was made up of ordinary citizens, farmers and craftsmen. If you owned land, you could be drafted. You brought your own weapons, fought for your country, and returned home to your fields. But as Rome grew, its wars became longer, farther, harder. The old system began to collapse. It was no longer possible to just grab your spear and helmet and head to war. Trained soldiers were needed, and those trained soldiers wanted to be paid. That's when Rome decided to change the rules. The state began paying its soldiers. At first it seemed fair, a way to preserve loyalty. But before long, even that wasn't enough. So Rome turned its wars into income. Every new conquest brought taxes. Every victory brought new slaves, new wealth, new gold. Wars began to finance themselves, and the more Rome fought, the more power it gained to fight again. But war was never free, and eventually Rome learned its cost. During the long and exhausting Punic Wars, the Republic went deep into debt, borrowing from its wealthy citizens, from bankers, and from the powerful financial class known as the equites. These loans had nothing to do with patriotism. They were investments, and the investors expected profit in return, interest payments, tax collection rights, trade privileges in newly conquered lands. War had turned into a business, and those investors wanted more of it. Over time, politics began to revolve around money. Generals promised gold in exchange for power. Senators profited from the wars they approved. Private contractors, the publicani, handled logistics and tax collection, like CEOs in togas. This was military-industrial capitalism, 2,000 years before the term existed. But every empire reaches its limit. Wars slowed down, but expenses didn't. The soldiers still demanded pay. The lenders still wanted interest. And so emperors turned to an old but dangerous game. They began to tamper with money itself. The denarius, once pure silver, slowly became counterfeit, debased and devalued. At first just a little, then much more. Prices began to rise. Trust collapsed. And that silver coin, once a symbol of Rome's power, became nothing more than a relic of the past. The rich, of course, saw it coming. They moved their wealth into land and gold, investments the state couldn't fake, and those who weren't rich, they were left holding money that was no longer worth anything, working harder, for coins that bought less and less. Inflation is not modern. Rome lived through it. The Roman Empire didn't fall because of one bad emperor, or because of one lost war. Rome began to crumble from within, the moment its money lost meaning. Now pause and look around you. Huge budget deficits, wars financed by debt, state banks quietly printing money to cover the gaps, a financial class that profits from every crisis. Sound familiar? The system has never really changed. Only the names have. Rome had its legions, we have our markets. Rome had silver coins, and we have fiat money, and both run on the same illusion. That growth can last forever, but nothing grows forever. When expansion stops, debt doesn't vanish. It changes direction, it turns inward. The state begins to pressure its own citizens through taxes, inflation, and control. Back then, there was bread and circuses. Today, low interest credit and endless distraction. Governments change, but the math doesn't. We no longer call it tribute. We call it monetary policy. We call it quantitative easing. But it's the same old trick. Cover the cracks, print more money, and hope no one notices. The Stoics had a name for it: delusion, and they were right. You can't completely escape the system, but you can understand it. You can stop ignoring how it really works. It begins by seeing the pattern, because once you see it, you can never unsee it. Rome's story wasn't just about conquest and spectacle. It was about the illusion of permanence. The belief that empires can outsmart math, that money can replace trust, that debt can last forever. But every empire eventually learns the same harsh truth. So when you hear about the next stimulus, the next crisis, or the next war, don't just watch. Follow the money. Ask who lends, who profits, and who pays in the end. Because history doesn't just repeat. History warns.